how to, okay. Okay. So they have the sort of the business knowledge and the domain expertise to know how to make sense of that analysis in the sort of within the business context, and how to draw useful insights out of that, and how to make better decisions. So for making sort of better decisions, we want to somehow combine the skills and knowledge of both parties. And this intersection of these skills is where really impactful business insights come from. So what can we do to combine these skills? Well, basically, I've kind of two very, at a very high level, I've got kind of two tools at my disposal. Number one, we can build self-service sort of dashboards. We can construct these in an interactive way so that one dashboard can fulfill the needs of many, many business users. And on the other hand, I can also do bespoke pieces of work, like usually a one-off piece of work where I work with a domain expert to explore and analyze some sort of specific problem. So let's have a look at sort of these two methods and have a look at some of their sort of pros and cons. So on the self-service side, we can create dashboards. So for example, I could show year-on-year performance, thinking about my retail my sort of retail background, looking at sort of year-on-year performance of the business. I can allow the user to select categories or regions or whatever as sort of their part of the world, and they can then use interactivity to drill down into sort of finer and finer detail. And that is all very well and good. That provides sort of a good way of having one sort of tool that you sort of services lots of different needs. And it has some advantages and disadvantages. And so the advantages is it's built by analysts. So that means that the business user doesn't have to know anything about the underlying database or data modeling. They don't need to know about the best way to visually encode data. That's our skill set, etc. It's very efficient, so I can build one dashboard or one single piece of work, and that can satisfy the needs of many business users and many departments. It's consistent, so all departments and all business users are looking at data in exactly the same way, the same calculations, the same business logic methodology, and so on. Unlike a situation I see a lot of the time in companies where every department has its own Excel tracker with their own sort of weird and wonderful ways of doing things. This makes everything consistent. However, it's not all sort of roses in the garden of self-serve, because on the downside, if we're meeting the needs of most business users, there are going to be some analytics needs that go unsatisfied. And the other sort of probably often overlooked problem is that the filtering and interactivity and drill downs in these dashboards use the rigid grouping of things. This is sort of the business hierarchy. So here we're talking about how products are grouped into categories and subcategories, stores into regions and formats, dates into fiscal calendars and financial calendars. And and this sort of, in my experience, is one of the main reasons that we end up doing bespoke analysis. So for example, if I go looking back at my sort of world of grocery retail, very common task is look at sort of seasonal performance. So for example, Easter this year versus Easter last year, where Easter often falls in different fiscal calendar weeks each year. The products also don't have a nice grouping in the sort of the business hierarchy. So there's not a level that's called Easter products 2021, Easter products 2022. So this is where we end up having to do kind of bespoke analysis. And so bespoke analysis does get rid of a lot of these problems. It is flexible, it incorporates nuance, we can do bespoke groupings on the fly, but that comes at a cost. So it's not very efficient. So from an analyst perspective, I do a single piece analysis just for one person or one team. This is usually often a one-off, and therefore it's sort of not reusable. It can be inconsistent. So I might do a bit of analysis for a particular client or business user on Easter, and I do it a certain way. I'm not available when they want to do Christmas analysis. Another analyst does it, excuse me, in a slightly different way. And essentially, we've got two different ways of doing what is essentially exactly the same problem, looking at a season year on year. And then the other issue that's sort of often overlooked is a sort of a lack of empowerment. And there's a real feeling, a sort of a lack of feeling of empowerment on the side of the business user, who's sort of reliant on the analyst and their availability in their resource to work up the analysis in the first place and then make any changes. They want to say, oh, I want to add an extra week to my Christmas tracker. They can't do it. They've got to come to me, and I've got to be free, and I've got to go and change the model and sort of send it all over to them. And as sort of one of my favorite bloggers at the moment is a chap called Ben Standstill, and as he put it, self-serve from the end user perspective is a feeling. And I think this aspect is often overlooked. And so a big part of this this comes from the bespoke grouping of things, is the fact that you just want to be able to group things in a non-standard way. Because when you sort of look at how you sort of analytics and analysis, although we do a lot of different things, it all seems quite different. When you sort of boil it down to things, grouping things and then seeing how each group has changed with respect to time and one another is actually what a huge amount of analysis kind of boils down to. So to be able to group things on the fly and look at them and the time frames on the fly is a sort of super valuable sort of way of sort of looking at specific problems. So that now, after all that, I said I very much care about the why. So now we can actually get into what I came to talk about, which is sets in Tableau. So when we think about bespoke groupings in Tableau, I think there are kind of three main ways that we can do this. We can use groups, we can use formulas, and we can use sets. And my go-to method is sets. And then I will often use then formulas in those sets to generate new dimensions or groupings. So the reason I like sets multi-select and like parameters. You can choose elements of a set by selecting them from a list, just ticking the list, which means a lot less typing. I'm quite lazy. I don't like typing. So being able to click things is a lot easier for me than typing out in a formula. The in operator has helped quite a lot, but it's still a little more typing than clicking a button. And I also find when you want to edit the contents of the set, I find the group user interface can be a little bit hard to use when new elements appear and they get put into another category and trying to move them into things, whereas a set is super simple to change. So sets is kind of my go-to way of doing it. And sets are super powerful in Tableau. And when I'm doing bespoke analysis, it's absolutely the way that I will group things on the fly for that particular analysis. Now, the way sets have worked in Tableau hasn't really, in terms of under the bonnet, hasn't really changed. They've always worked exactly the same way. I assume they've been there since the start. They have certainly since in the sort of 9 years I've been using Tableau. But what has gradually changed is how we can expose the control of sets, or how you add or remove elements from sets over the years. So pre-2018, it was only really possible, in fact, it was only possible to change the contents of a set, so what is in and out of that set, in the authoring of a workbook. So really, it's only really Tableau developers or Tableau Explorer users and who've been trained who could actually go in and actually edit the contents of the set. Then in 2018, 2019, set actions were introduced, which for the first time allowed me as an analyst to expose the control of the set to the end user. And this was a great addition. However, this was the only way we could do it. And set actions weren't always the best user interface for every situation. It wasn't always intuitive to the end user. If when you hit an action, whether or not that was going to add something to the set, when you deselected it, would it remove the set? Would it clear the set? Now, there are some good hacky workarounds out there that I do use. You can kind of create buttons that allow you to sort of remove elements from set, etc., like that. But only having actions as a user interface for sets was limited because it wasn't always the best way of doing it. And then in 2020, 2021, we got the show set control option. This went a bit under the radar for me. I actually noticed it about 4 or 5 months ago, and it is it's a real game changer. It's a really simple change that's made a sort of an absolutely sort of massive difference to what I can build and how I can cross that bridge between bespoke analysis and self-serve. So let us dive into Tableau. I'm going to do something a bit live here, so hopefully it won't go too badly wrong, and have a look what I mean. So I've got, starting off here with just put that to full screen, with a blank Tableau dashboard, and we're going to connect to everyone's favorite fake online retailer, the Sample Superstore. And say I wanted to do, as I was talking before about some analysis looking at, say, Easter versus Easter. And I want to sort of create a bespoke set of dimensions that says Easter this year, Easter last year. So I can very easily create a set for those dates that I want. So if I just click here, I can create, and I can create a set. And to generalize this a bit more, I'm actually just going to call this, my comp period. Sets have lots of other options. They have conditional sets using aggregate formulas, which are something I use a lot of. The top is really handy as well. With LODs, it's a little bit less used. I use them a little bit less now, so it's still really good. But today I'm just going to concentrate on the really simple way of using sets, of just literally clicking the things that you want in the set. So I'm going to create select a time frame. So let's have a look. So go from about there to, let's try and think what I remember, to the, there we go, to there. And that is, so everything is either in the set or it's out the set. So that is my comp period. So if I'm just going to move all my Zoom junk to the bottom. Okay, let me close that. So if I now bring my order dates onto my columns, let's just do that continuous. And I bring in my comp period. I've now isolated that period of time. And I can do the same again to create my current period. So let me go create here, and I go create set again. I'm going to call this my current period. And I can select some dates from Easter this year. What was that? That was about, it was a bit later this year, wasn't it? Yeah, it was about the, I think it was actually, yeah, in April. So let's go from about there to about the, I think it was the 17th, was Easter Sunday, possibly. Okay, cool. So now I have now got my current period. Again, I've isolated those dates. So what I can now do is I can create a formula to, so if I go here and create formula, I can now create a formula to create me my this year, last year comparisons. So I'll just call this my comp current period. And I'm just going to say, if you're in the current period, then current, else if the comp period. And sets, by the way, are just true false. They're Boolean, so you don't need to, you can if you want, you could put that, but as I said, oops, not that. True, you could do that, but as I said, I'm lazy, so I just really need that because it's either true or it's false, and we're going to call that then comp. Else we're going to ignore it. They're going to ignore it. End. Okay, so I've now created a dimension on the fly, and I've now been able to isolate both my period of time that I want. So let me first of all, let's get rid of the ignore. Let's just do ignore and exclude that. So we're now down to just those dates here. Let's bring this in here. Let's put this onto discrete, and we can now see I've got my two sets of periods. So if I want to compare these, I need to do something a little bit fancy. I want to put them over the same into the same indexing thing. So I'm just going to do that. So I'm just going to go into here. I'm going to create a calculator field. Create calculator field. This is going to be called my 0-day index, and we're going to do. Don't worry too much about this formula. This is really just to do this. I could do a whole talk on using date indexes and date diffs with LODs. So we're going to do this by day. We are going to do it as a fixed. We're going to use that comp current period. We're going to use the min of my order date, and we're just going to do the order date. Cool. So I think if I've not messed it up, that should do what I want to do. So let's have a quick look if that does it. Yeah, I've got 0 to 14, 0 to 14. So now I can very easily plot these. Let's do the sales. Let's do the sales on here. And I can now plot these on a consistent, let me just move that off a little bit. Oops, there we go. Cool. Okay, let's go that way. So I can now plot these on a consistent axis. And we're just going to do it as a running total as well as a cumulative. And let me just, to satisfy my own pedanticness, can I just make it into a slightly different color scheme? There we go. So that's super good. That's super useful. That is how I would do a piece of bespoke analysis looking at Easter versus Easter. However, what option I have now, since the slight change, is I can now, when I click in here, I've got this new option called Show Set. And if I click Show Set, I can now expose the contents and editability of that set to the end user. I get all the nice controls I get with a filter. So I'm going to be nice and add an apply button and make it a multi-value drop down. I can do the same with my comp period. what we're going to do show sets, and I'm going to be nice again, and I'm going to give an apply button. And I'm also going to do a multi-value drop down. And now I can expose this to an end user. And while it defaults back to Easter, if they want to do anything else, they can now just go into here and they can edit the dates that they want as their comp and their currents. And it is super easy for them to do it. So I can build one model or one Tableau workbook dashboard and give people the flexibility to change all the bits. I'm doing all the calculations, I'm doing the visuals, they don't have to worry about any of that. They can just change stuff. So to show you an example of a sort of Productiony dashboard that we've done, this is a dashboard that is a very common problem, not just in retail, but in a lot of businesses, which is a pre-post analysis. You've got something, in this case, it's a store or stores, you've done something to them, you may have refitted them, you may have done some sampling, you may have changed the range, you may have changed the promotional strategy, lots of things you could have done to a store or stores, and you want to compare how's that store or set of stores done versus a controlled set of stores. So here I can, the first top one is just to allow the user to compare between whether they want to use 2019 or 2020 or last year, just because everyone, obviously 2020 and 2021 were a bit of a train wreck. So most people compare to 2019 still. So that's just a parameter. But then this is how they can choose what investment store, what store did I invest in, or what set of stores did I do some treatment to? They can then, here, another set, they can choose what control stores. By default, it will be all the stores, but they might want to choose a particular set of stores that are of the same format or the same type. They can choose their pre-period. So what period of time do I want to use as my base period for both sets of stores? And I can also do my post. So after I did my refit or my treatment to that store or set of stores, what period of time do I want to assess that difference from? So if we go across the top here, we'll look at net sale because it's the most simple one to understand. Is if we look on this, not this talks about barbell charts, but but barbell charts in this situation are a very effective way of visualizing data because I'm encoding both change and scale in one small visual, which is just amazing. But that's a whole different talk. So if we look here, I've got what this is showing me is in my post period. So since my refit, my investment set of stores is 23% up, and the other control stores are +5. If I just compared these two numbers, that doesn't take into account how they were tracking before they did the investment. So we also want to know what were they doing in the pre-period. So we can see here that this was tracking the investment store was already doing better than the general population of stores. And so I can then see how that one has moved, the investment stores, the control stores, and then I show here 12.3% is the difference in length between these two lines. We can then also see it by week. So you can see here is my pre-period in this light gray, my post-period in the dark gray. I've got a bit in the middle where I don't want to include because that's the time I was refitting the store. So it was closed, there was scaffolding everywhere. It's not fair to compare it, so I can ignore those periods, but I do want to see that they exist. And you can then just see how the investment stores have tracked over time. You get an overall figure of how they've moved. You see the scale, and you can also get a breakdown showing it by the different categories. And being interactive, I could then click on, if I wanted to be particularly interested in fresh category, I click on fresh and see what is that store refit done to fresh, and I can really explore it. So this is quite a complicated build. There's quite a lot going on here. There's quite a lot of SQL behind in the background as well, but it doesn't really matter because this one model that I can build can satisfy lots and lots of business requirements, and everyone's looking at things in a consistent way as well. So back to my final slide, just to have a final recap of what self-serve tools with sets now do. They're built by analysts, which is good. They're efficient because we can build one model and everyone can use it. They're consistent because everyone's looking at things in the same way. And now they're also, the other thing with consistency is we may over time incrementally improve this dashboard. So somebody might say, I want to know about footfall, I want to know about transactions, I want to know it at this level. And as we add these extra incremental improvements to this dashboard, everybody gets it. It's not that it's not like the Easter analysis has transactions and footfall and the Christmas doesn't because it was done before or whatever it might be. Everyone gets all the improvements. It's flexible with bespoke groupings. So we can change things on the fly and it really empowers the end user. So although it's a really small change in the UI, and I wish I was showing you something a bit more complicated, but it's really simple. It's literally just an option. It's made a massive difference to the kind of tools that I can sort of build for our end users. Oh, and that is me done.
Simon, absolutely fantastic, really good, and I really enjoyed that, because I actually, do you know why? Because when we spoke, you know, you for the blog that I did, you'd mentioned these sort of examples and what it was used for, and so when you were building it there in front of us, I was kind of going, God, there's an awful lot of you know, ifs and thens and you know, being put in here, and I was saying that could be quite complicated for people to, you know, put together, you know what I mean? But then I remembered what you'd said, and then when you got to the part where I can now hand this over and the user can control it and get the insights from the data that they know, I was there. Yeah, that's exactly what he had said to me before. So it was really nice, and it was really quick as well, the way you did it. So it was very impressive. I wanted to ask you one thing though: the color scheme. Why did you change that? Was that just your own personal thing, or I know there's a whole thing around the colorblind stuff and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Is there any reason?
I just think that when you have the current period should be like a lot darker than the other period. It just means that you don't really necessarily need a legend. It kind of is implicit that the last year would be lighter than the other one. It's just, yeah. So it's just, I try wherever I can with colors, I try to make it as sort of implicit as possible what the color scheme is, so you don't have to sort of build lots of legends. I'm quite keen on getting rid of as much sort of screen junk as I possibly can. And so quite often I will use things like that, and it's quite obvious that the dark one will be the current period. So yeah, it wasn't. I've got no issue at all with blue and orange. They're perfect. They're good color schemes, but it depends what you're showing.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So it's just literally getting rid of junk that's on your screen and having a cleaner dashboard.
Exactly. And so it's also, if you do, even if you have to use a legend, which I'll often encode the legend, as you'll see, I mean, in here, you'll see that actually I've actually encoded. You don't need the legend because I've encoded it into the title here. So pre is lighter and post is darker. But also when it's implicit, it means you don't have to keep checking up to a legend to see what something is. So again, it doesn't distract that. It doesn't distract your flow from the analytics. I'm just trying to get rid of as much stuff as possible so people can focus on the visuals.
Cool. Okay, it's interesting. Okay, and I mean, I think there's a question here from Ida. Just let me check. Ida O'Keefe. How you doing, Ida? Do you put any controls on there so that people don't choose overlapping pre-post periods, for example, or choose the store they want to compare as part of the control also for another example?
It's a great question. So in terms of the second part of that question, the order of the if statement is really important. So because once an if statement has been satisfied, it exits out. So by playing the if statement, if you're in the investment store group, then you're in investment stores. Else, if you're in the control stores, you're in the control stores. It means that you can't be in both groups. So the one you pick in the investment store automatically takes preference. So even though here store 21 is still actually in this list here, it doesn't actually go into the control stores. In terms of the controls of overlapping dates and stuff, I'm kind of relying on my end users to have a little bit of we're doing a lot to make their life easier. So there's going to be I expect a little bit of I guess
we call it cop on. We call it cop on over here. You're allowed to use that kind of language, no problem.
I mean, you absolutely could though. I mean, you could very easily put a little kind of warning sign somewhere where you're saying if the other great thing with sets is, I can go into, is that because they're sets, you can create sets at intersection of sets as well. And they can be the intersection, or they can be the group of all the sets. So you can very easily test and say, if this date is in both this set and this set, then sort of generate an error, like a little error warning somewhere. Like just create a little sheet, put it up in the top corner somewhere, and have a big red exclamation mark that comes up if anyone chooses it, and maybe a warning that says you've chosen overlapping dates. So that's the way that I'd handle it. But so far, I've relied on my users to get that. But yeah, it is a good point. It's all of these things. It's all a question of how much extra effort you want to go into, which is going to obviously slow things down a little bit because I've got another if statement it's got to check. So it's always how much time do I want to put into it, how much extra slowness to the dashboard potentially by adding another if statement, another if statement, another if statement, versus the sort of the kind of the cost of the fact that someone might choose overlapping dates.
Come here to me. Here's the thing, and I don't want you to be breaching any secret stuff about your business or anything like that if you can't. But I'm going to ask the question if you don't mind. So like when you have the customer, right, and because there's always this sort of people love their Excel spreadsheets still, right? In an awful lot of cases, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got a customer and you're saying, look, I can build this for you, and it's going to show you this, and it's going to give you this, and it's going to do it quickly, and that kind of thing. But you'll just have to learn to read it a little bit, and you'll just have to learn to use it, because you're not actually really asking to build anything here as such.
Yeah.
If I'm right. But how have you noticed over the years that it's become easier to persuade people to use this kind of a product?
It has, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's still absolutely. I mean, the production version of this dashboard, unfortunately, does have an export to Excel tabbed Excel button on it.
Yeah.
So they can export the underlying data to Excel. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously the pandemic was a terrible thing, but one of the things it did do, if we're trying to look for positives, is it did introduce the world to data visualization. If you think it's not, we had every day on the TV, in the government thing going through the data visualization. I showed actually, if you in the presentation when I was one of the slides had one of the fantastic visuals about COVID from the Financial Times, who did an amazing job. John Byrne-Murdoch, so I'd definitely check all that out on visualizing the pandemic. So that's really helped people. But also the other way I do it is I'll just give them their table of data and I say, which of us can come to the insight quicker?
Yeah. Okay.
And I will always beat them. And they will sort of see, I mean, here I've got both the number they want. That's the number that they want.
Yes.
That's there very quickly. So you can just leave it down the left-hand side. However, the second that you want to know something about it, you suddenly want this extra detail. Yeah. So I give them what they need, but I also give them the extra detail. And the fact of there's the fact that, they can suddenly go and look at beer, wines and spirits specifically, which they can't do in their Excel without a huge amount of work.
Yeah, huge amount of faffing about. Yeah.
And another thing, which is like not really part of this at all, is that everything feeds live off a Snowflake database, and everything gets updated through overnight flows and daily flows when data comes in, which means they don't have to actually, it's always ready. It doesn't have to do anything, which is a little hook that I can get, that basically you can do your Excel where you've got copy and paste infinite sort of downloads into the back end of some spreadsheet, and that then feeds some pivot tables that then hit a macro that does something else. Or this is already up to date every single day, and that's a quite nice little hook as well.
Well, yeah, I would imagine it's quite a nice big hook, to be honest.
It does,
yeah, absolutely. No, I mean it's a different league altogether, isn't it? And I mean it's for the end user, like I mean it's for the head honchos, who need to look at this stuff and make their decisions based on that, and they're the ones who don't have the time.
And if we can get them to using it live when they're discussing this, when they go and have a review of like some store investment with, if we get them live using this, they can actually answer questions on the fly. So like, what happened to Fresh when we did this refit and changed the categories around? Oh, that happened to it. Okay, why did it go here? You can actually use this as a live thing, whereas an Excel is often, or a presentation is often, you've copied and pasted some loads and loads of slides and things in there. And when someone asks you a question, you don't really have an answer to it because it's like, oh, take it away. Here, you can actually query it all live.
And by the time they've gone and taken that away, it might have changed.
Absolutely, exactly. Yeah, completely. Yeah, this is always showing you the very latest data that we possibly have, without you doing anything. So that in itself gives you that time back, because people end up spending so much time building or downloading, exporting, building their Excel spreadsheets up every day or every week, that by the time they've done that, they don't really have much time left to actually analyze the data. Like just building a spreadsheet, getting the report, emailing it out is their job. Actually, their job is actually to look at the data and understand it. This says you don't need to, this all does it for you. If you can order a flight on EasyJet, you can use this user interface.
I got you. Cool. Okay. Well, look, I could talk to you for a good bit more, but we're going to go on to. I got to say thank you very much. And if anybody else has any questions, by the way, please pop them into the chat, and we can always go back to Simon and get some more information. And thanks for that question, Ida. Very good. But at this point, I'd like to hand over to Steve Martin, if I can. And Steve, how are you doing there? You're okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, John.
Good stuff. Okay, I'm going to go on mute, Steve, and I'll let you take it away, my mate. Okay, so we'll see you in about 20 minutes or so.
Okay, that's good. Make sure.
Thank you. Nice one.
Oh, I've lost my Zoom. Right, so yeah, hi. As we had that brief introduction at the very beginning, I am Steve Martin. I have been working with Tableau now for around 14 years. I first came to Tableau in 2008, and I was in that same situation. I've been an analyst now for about 20 odd years, and I was doing it all throughout my degree. And in 2007, when I graduated, I joined Card, and I was building reports in SQL Server reporting services, which is great because that gives you a lot of sort of interactivity, direct hand interactivity on the database. But it's not great for dashboarding, and the dashboards were built in Excel and Excel VBA, and I just trying to change something was always a pain point. Just want to double check. Can you guys all see these things on the side of my screen? I just want to make sure you can't see it. Guess not. That's good. I've got a whole heap of stuff around my screen. It's quite sort of standing out. Anyway, so I first started using Tableau 2008, but at the same time I was using Click as well, and my journey through Tableau was analytics, engineering, visual, and into visual analytics, and I started sort of teaching Tableau around 2010. And so yeah, that's kind of my background and where I've come from. But the big point for me is that I tend to build dashboards that kind of look a bit like this, but they're sort of sitting on top of very, very large data sets, sort of upwards of 2 or 3 billion rows of data. So I've always got sort of performance at the back of my mind, and how the front end is going to be interacting with the back end, because no matter how great your dashboard is, you're going to lose you will lose your audience if there's a lot of clicking they have to do, or if there's a lot of waiting around. When I've had situations whereby you're sort of I was brought into a particular firm whereby Tableau was taking upwards of 4.5 minutes to turn around, just because of it was sitting on top of a 2 billion row data set, and the way that things have been built in Tableau, this is going back 7 or 8 years ago now, it was badly designed for the back end. So everything that I try and build is all designed to try and maximize real estate, and try and to limit the amount of impact on the back end. So really quick question. I've got a couple of dashboards that I want to actually go over with you. Mine's the more Tableau based, kind of focus on just one particular function here. Mine's very, very Tableau based. I don't have a PowerPoint deck to go with. So this first dashboard, I've got 3 dashboards to compare. I just want to go over the 3 of them and ask for your opinion, apart from the glaringly obvious in a moment, if there's anything that you feel that is completely different from one to the other. So this one, trusty Superstore sales again. We can see that we've got a bunch of stuff. I've got some sheets masquerading as filters down the side here. They kind of work. You sort of click something and we can move around the data. We can add the consumer in. We know that. So everything's working fine. We go to West. We can see that this is all working fine. Bring in my second dashboard. Yes, this is a ClickSense dashboard. It's exactly the same. It works exactly the same way. We can start moving around our data. We can select no, we can't select California. We can just select the West region. You'll notice the breadcrumbs are coming across the top. This enables us to filter straight off in one way or another. And then the last one is the Power BI dashboard. These are, again, it's exactly the same. We can start filtering in. They have this rather nice function, and they have this really annoying function up here that will automatically adjust its the number formatting, which Tableau doesn't do. But the filters for this are all controlled down by the side. Now, going back to the over these 3. Can anybody tell me if there was anything massively different between each of those dashboards that I've brought up, other than the fact that one was Click, Power BI, and Tableau? Guessing not. Notice how whenever we come to work with Tableau or any of the tools, we've always got filters down the side, usually down the side. Simon, I noticed you had a bunch down the side of yours as well. So the classic one is, okay, so we're sitting here and everything's at sales and what have you. And what happens if I want to select, say, for example, I want to go find out my profits or my customers? We can't, you guys can't see this, but clicking or doing something, it just doesn't happen. So we're sitting here and we're saying, right, okay, so this is on sales. We go to customers. Oh, actually, we've just gone to customers. profit. So we've now got the direct interaction with the dashboard without having to go and look for the measure parameter to go and change that. We've got this direct interaction with the dashboard, and that's what I'm my chosen subject for you guys today is the change parameter actions. A very, very small change of to the overall parameters, but something came out in May 2019. It's kind of like a happy birthday to the change parameter action. Really, really small function, but I just want to know how many guys, how many guys on the call have actually seen this function or even come to use it. There's been many people out there on the call. Okay, Simon, thanks, Simon. I knew you would. Anybody else? I'm guessing we haven't. So that's good. That's good. See, when I wrote a blog entry about this last year, actually it was last May the 24th, so just over a year ago now. I see a lot of users using a lot of the different functions available. And don't get me wrong, in the last 7 years, I say 7 years because that takes us back to April 2015, version 9, with the release of LAD expressions. There's been huge amounts of new functions, new features added, things such as like density, for example, or the addition to the additional what do they call it now? The analytics pane and things like that. We've had a lot of new functions and features appear, but none to me are more powerful than this one small feature. For me, it was a big game changer. Biggest reasons why, I'm just going to bring up a different dashboard here. Biggest reasons why is because it enables us to maximize our screen real estate. If you can recall from Simon's dashboard just a few moments ago, had a bunch of filters down the side. It had a nice section that said filters on it. This is great, and for Simon's really cool feature of bringing out those set buttons to enable us to be able to modify those sets on the fly. This is really cool. But for the vast majority of analytics, when users are actually interacting with dashboards, I'm finding on a more personal perspective that more often than not, users are more interested in single select. They're only really after one particular aspect of their dashboard. So this is one of the major limitations of parameters. They are single select, but what the change parameter function has done is it's converted parameters from being a static single use value, or a value that needs to be changed through a list, for example, or through some form of drop down in that respect. It's changed it to the equivalent of an in-out variable. And variables are the bread and butter of our lives. Everything we do it is controlled by a variable. It doesn't matter if we're taking money out of the cash machine, paying for goods, copy and pasting, or even within our own general lives. Our environments around us are all controlled by variables. Without a variable, we are literally going through life, getting up in the morning, going to bed, getting up, going to bed, going to bed. There's no variance in that. A variable, on the other hand, enables us to be able to capture information and use that in one way or another. And that was kind of the real key point of this. By adding a simple function in, Tableau has enabled us to actually bring about much more interactive dashboards without a user coming along and needing to look for a button. Say for example, we're sitting on this dashboard here. It's a four page, as you can see, four quadrants. We've all seen the classic example where we switch charts. Well, maybe if we click about, I'm obviously not changing the measure here, but I'm actually changing the chart. Same with the customers. Click on customers, we've got a Pareto now. So instead of having a button down the side to control the actual information on the chart, instead I'm actually controlling it again off the bands. To sort of delve into this a little bit further, I went ahead and created a set myself on this one here. This one actually operates slightly differently. What this one actually does is it does populate a set, but the set here is actually being picked up by a parameter. The calculation behind it is simply if it's using a conditional calculation that basically says that if the region is not equal to the value that is in the parameter, then classify this, and this is the blue line, the other, and otherwise it will be marked off as not included, which is the West, and then it's just a simple calculation behind that to power that item. So we can actually start to create fairly interactive dashboards. I mean, I know that the actual example isn't that great. I kind of wanted to give an indication of the controlling the parameter and controlling a set using a parameter. Another aspect is what you may have noticed is most of this dashboard is all of our trusty Superstore set, with the exception of the bottom right chart. This is AdventureWorks. I'm not quite sure how many guys on the call have actually come across AdventureWorks, but like Superstore, which was created by Tableau, AdventureWorks was created first of all in 2005 by Microsoft when they were re-releasing SQL Server. So it's a fairly big dashboard database. It's not many records. It's only around about 100,000 records of that. It's about 13 tables. But how many times do you often come across a situation whereby you need to be able to control a different data set? Now we can do this using on the relational model, or we can do this using cross data source filters. In this instance, on the other hand, I'm just going to bring up the AdventureWorks database. It's not, I'm using a live connection. All my data is live connected to SQL Server, and the AdventureWorks database here is actually running from a custom SQL. It's not actually doing a lot, but the key one is that the actual state here, which is what I'm going to be using in a moment, is got a completely different name to state within the Superstore sales set. To top it off, it's actually coming from a completely different field. It's coming from the geography table rather than our sales data. So it's not immediately available in terms of a field. You can see here I'm going to be controlling it using the parameters. So if I just drop back onto our summary sheet, hitting California, for example, we can see that our two bottom charts have actually switched over. Once the Superstore is just got a basic filter on there, so again powered by parameter. The AdventureWorks, on the other hand, has just drilled straight into California, and all this was handled by a single global filter, which I would be a single global parameter, which I should be demonstrating in just a moment. Again, we can do something slightly different. We can then use another parameter. I'm going to drop it down to LA here because it's quite a big number to actually sort of find. In this instance, not only have I sort of filtered into our data at California level across two different data sets, but I'm then going to be using a single chart to then highlight LA on the other chart. So again, all of this controlled by parameters, and this to me is a really sort of big point within the within giving the control back to the user, because ultimately it means that I can therefore, within just a couple of small steps, I can actually begin to bring in a much more detail into the dashboard, and I've got a lot more control. The classic one within the example I'm giving here, the custom SQL of the AdventureWorks, has been in the past I've found that I'm doing fairly big sort of complex processing of data. So if I have a control, unfortunately, due to the Tableau order of operations, which actually is the SQL order of operations, the filtering that Tableau would generally do, it's generally done at the very last level of the stream. So you have a whole heap of data and business going on, and when you actually apply a filter, it filters, generally speaking, right at the very tip of the stream, immediately before the data is actually streamed across to your workbook. In this instance, on the other hand, I can perform a lot more much more deeper data analytics, not only just from filtering, but also I can completely change the direction and the order of the statement. I can be bringing in new fields into the custom SQL just by controlling a parameter. And all this is all coming off of the one change, which is from our dashboard actions. In fact, this whole dashboard there's not a single filter in sight. They're all being controlled off of a bunch of parameter actions. The benefit there is it's exactly the same as having the parameters on the side, but they're not visible. It just enables users to have to be able to actually control their data directly from the visual. It means that, I mean, I'm not a great fan of scrolling dashboards, but in the event of scrolling dashboards, rather than have to then scroll back up the page to go and look for a filter or parameter or what have you, they can actually, users can just drill into the data. Now, I'm just going to quickly set one of these up just as an example. I'm going to use a fairly sort of complex example. I've got two sheets open down here. The first one is the sales sheet over here. What I've actually got is this is a year over year, so month over month performance. And it'd be really, really smart if we can actually have this bolted on to our sales data using a sheet and tooltip. The difference is that unlike a normal one, which just drags the sheet in, what we're actually going to be doing here is we're going to be creating a self-updating tooltip. So as you move through your data, more data is pulled through into the tooltip. And this is actually handled just through an index to actually act as a row sequencer and a late filter. So we're going to be using another table calculation to set this up. And we've just got a parameter down here, which is p index. It's currently set at 11. I'm going to switch it over to 3, and you'll understand why in just a moment. So I'm going to put that into place. It's not doing anything at all. The two sheets are still exactly how they've been defined. All I'm going to do is crack open my index, which is just a straightforward index calculation. I'm going to move it on to the marks within my sheet. I'm going to bring it over to discrete. I'm not going to change the direction. I'm going to keep it at table across, because we just want each period to be numbered from 1 to whatever that will be, 24, I think. So that's the first part. The second part is our tooltip. Just going to add the sheet, which is called month over month by category. The only difference is I'm going to make a couple of changes. I'm going to switch this one over to category. So it's going to filter the actual data itself to the category level. And just because this is going to get quite big, I'm going to increase it up to 600 high. If we hover over it now, we can see that all the data in our data point is coming through at January all the way down, and we can see that this is on the technology. We can switch over to furniture, and we've got our values. But this is only part of the story. The final part, or the second part, is the late filter. Again, it's going to be running from the p index. The calculation behind this is just that index is less than p index plus 1. This is basically the same as doing less than or equal to p index. The difference is that when you're dealing with big data, this is only 9,000 rows. It's not going to make a difference, but it can make a difference if I say if the RDBMS only has to do one check, that is less than, rather than less than or equal to. So it's a second step. So that's just the way that I set things up. You don't have to. You can obviously use a less than or equal to. So this one, I'm going to bring this one on. I'm going to place it up here because we do need to change it to table down. We can see on our month over month filter that I changed, change that to p index. This is the time that it all goes wrong. Oh no, it's not. It's showing as true. I just need to switch it over to table down. We can now see that the top 3 entries are now going to be set to true. If I move this over to activate the late filter, set to true, and now we're only getting the 3 entries coming through. So if we now go back to our 3, we're at 3, and literally if we change this up to 5, for example, we've now got the 5 in. Now is the final part. We are just going to go into our dashboard. We're going to add the action, change the parameter. This is going to be called p index sales, and all I'm doing is I'm just going to deselect all the charts. I'm going to add the sales one in. We're going to do it on hover, targeting the p index. The source field is going to be my index field, so it's going to pick that up. Press OK to activate that. And now, as we move over our data, that filter begins to grow. And I would probably flip that around the other way around. It requires an extra step of calculations there, but essentially the purpose of it is it gives you the ability to have a self-updating tooltip. So is everybody with me so far?
Yeah, 100%. It's magic. Okay,
so why would we want to do this beyond the purpose of obviously the interactivity? There's a second step behind the functionality itself. and that is the aspect of performance. You see, with filters, you may or may not be aware that to build a filter, what Tableau needs to do is it needs to issue a command, a select distinct command against the data source. And that data source needs to run through the entire column of however many rows, 3 billion in the case of some of my instances, and it has to find all the distinct entries and then bring it back and use that to populate your filter, which is the reasons why Tableau tends to recommend not using any more than around 5 quick filters on a page, because the performance impacts are fairly huge. Well, in this instance, not only have we maximized or freed up our screen real estate, but the second thing is that we have no filters to build as such, because we're controlling everything off the parameters. We are saying, okay, we want to know our items just for the period that we're looking at. We don't need to worry about the performance impacts. Therefore, when we are connecting, especially connecting live, we can be running our data directly from the database without the intrusion, if you like, from the need to build more filters than is necessary, especially when users are, generally speaking, using them for single select. So again, when I am I tend to build a lot through using custom SQL or SQL engineer and SQL analyst. It enables me to build much more fluid dashboards that are doing a lot more. I suppose it depends entirely as to your direction, whether you're building self-serve routes such as Simon's, in which case you are therefore going to need to just connect straight to your data, or you're building dashboards that are very, very bespoke, or very, very have a very very specific purpose. Either way, by having the parameters in place, we can come along and start to by using parameters in this way, we can start to actually create a much more interactive experience. Some of the things that I've actually put together in the past have been, oh god, this thing's in the way, I can't quite get to my screen. Let's pull that down a bit. So some of the things I've actually sort of built, these are some of the blogs that I wrote last year. But one thing that sort of came out about a year ago when I was working for PwC, they said to me, okay, we really like the sort of the filter that you have, but are we able to actually adjust the font size of the filter, but just of this one filter? And of course we can, but not for all, not for a single filter. It's the formatting is effective for all. So in this instance, this is just a sheet masquerading as a filter. It looks like a filter, but it's not. But again, it utilizes the idea of a parameter. A single parameter is controlling the headers. It's controlling the filtering. These themselves are sets, and it's controlling everything that we actually see. And when we actually sort of start dropping in, we can. I'm just going to close this one off. I've got additional filters here that enables a user to identify a pipeline agreement that's going to be coming up, and filtering our data. And when this picks up this parameter, this is itself is actually attached to an agreement, and this agreement filters the expired agreement. So just one item enables us to identify data, and therefore enables an end user to be able to drop in and start to understand. This was actually built for PwC internal, so that they could they were in the process of a really big acquisition piece with Microsoft at the time, and they really wanted to know a lot more information, things like Salesforce and stuff. They wanted to be able to jump on an agreement and find out how that particular agreement had gone in terms of the overall purchases and performances overall. So again, by bringing parameters back into the front of Tableau, back into the foray, if you like, we're now in a situation whereby we've got the ability to really start to utilize those parameters, and to be able to give us a much more quicker and smarter experience without obviously having that ability for users to sort of drop in. I suppose that was the end of my presentation.
I think everybody is left in awe, I have to say. That was amazing. I love that. And just the look, Adam Byrne says here, I love that highlighter selection. Ida O'Keefe in capital letters, amazing. Sagar Pardeshi up in Letterkenny, fabulous example, Steve. Very nifty, Steve. I'll be taking that one from your colleague Simon Runc, or your fellow ambassador. And I think it was just fantastic to show what you were able to do with those. I know them, right? And in my very amateur use of Tableau, I have built them once or twice, but I don't think I've seen them. I don't know, other people might have different experiences, but I've never seen them used to such an extent, or in such a, what's the way of putting it? Flexible way. Is that the right way of saying it? I don't know if flexible is the right way of saying it, but just used, maybe not necessarily used for the way that they were meant to be used, but being taken and used to fit another purpose, if that's right. I think that was absolutely fantastic. There's another comment that's just come in. Thank you all for all your presentation, John Harold. I assume he has to nip off, and that's it. Has anybody else any other questions for Steve or Simon, indeed, about either of their presentations? I think that was fabulous.
Before we do, I've actually got I'm leaving this page up here. I should send the links out to you. In fact, you can find it very easy. We can see it's actually within the Tableau blogs. This page here, this presentation, I kind of wrote this page to be read within 5 minutes, and I tried to elaborate on it in 25 minutes. But you can find the majority of the source material that I used last year when I wrote this blog. So if you actually want to know, and there's a few more bits in here, just literally come along and search for it and start playing with that. But I'll take off my screen share now as well.
No, that's absolutely fantastic, and again, thank you very much. And as I said, if anybody has any questions, there is that's Kira Brennan. Is that Kira? Is that post to that's the link to what Steve just showed us? Yeah, Kira. Steve's blog. Yes, it is. Sorry, I see that underneath there. Sorry, I should have opened up the chat window. Okay, brilliant. That's great. Look, if anybody has any questions or anything, great. If you don't, that's great as well. And we can leave it at that. I really appreciate both speakers for taking the time and the considerable effort that is evident that they put into this. I mean, this is something, that as Tableau ambassadors they kind of do all the time. And actually, just before we go, one question, because we were kind of chatting about it a little bit before. I'll go to Simon on this, but what does it mean to you to be a Tableau ambassador?
It's really nice, because it basically, you get part of the ambassador community. So that means we get to have Slack channels with all the ambassadors, which is awesome because you can sort of lean on all their resources. We help answer questions together as well, because if I've got a question that I can answer, I've got the Flage twins who I can call on, who are Tableau ambassadors as well, or Jim, who's an amazing ambassador as well. And the other part of it is the kind of the giving back part, because I learned Tableau from nothing, from generous people in the community giving their time to me. And so it's only fair and right that you give that time back, but also by answer questions in the community, I've met thousands of problems in my day-to-day life. I might meet 300 problems a year. I've met probably 10,000 a year this way, and I've had to try and work through and solve them. And so often when I solve a question or a problem, that a very similar problem comes up in my day-to-day work. And I wouldn't have to solve it. So it's a combination of that learning together, that sort of supportiveness, and it's a little feather in your cap as well, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and the teacups, obviously. I drink a lot.
The teacups and the hoodies are big, and the Ferrero Rocher, which I believe Kira Brennan has now, and we have it on paper, has committed to.
That is legally binding, I think.
so they will be integral to that offering. Steve, for you, I mean, as a Tableau ambassador, you became Tableau ambassador back in September.
Yes, I did.
I mean, what does it mean to you? And I mean, it's a huge thing, this whole community, the Tableau community. It's a wonderful thing, I have to say.
It is. Well, I would say that I do echo Simon's thoughts and just there. Obviously, I came to Tableau before a community existed, but I didn't start really working or doing much with the community until 2011. And for me, being a Tableau ambassador for me enables me to feel like I am actually giving a lot more back. We have the ability. One thing that we do have, sort of sitting over here on my other screen, is we have the Tableau Slack channels as well. So it means that obviously within the forum itself, everything is a post. So I have to hope that somebody else sees it, particularly if I'm coming across any difficult questions, or if I'm trying to help somebody out in one way or another, and I come across a particular aspect, I'm able to, yes, I'm able to actually link them in on, sort of refer people in on the actual chat itself. But the other aspect of it is that using the Slack channel, I can drop straight out onto the Slack side of things and say, look, hey guys, I've come across a bit of a problem here. Does anybody have any specific expertise on this particular area? Lob the actual link in and immediately get people actually within the ambassador community sort of jumping straight onto that question. So for me, I can therefore give a much better experience to the users who actually are facing these difficulties or having these problems. So rather than me actually having to say, got an idea, this might actually work, but we'll bring somebody else in who I know will actually help on this one here, and then hope to God that they actually see their email and say, okay, yeah, I'm going to jump in. It's a case that it's on the Slack channel, or it might be the fact that they turn around and say, you know what, I don't have time to actually come in and give a hand on this one now, but explain this to the user, and therefore I can actually bring that back in. So having that entire aspect of it, this sort of immediate response that we get from the Slack channel, is really, really useful for me to be able to help others out. And so that to me is my biggest work. And I think that there's going to be, I say I think because I haven't experienced it myself, and that is, I believe that there's obviously a lot more for ambassadors to actually handle at conference, but I've never actually managed to make it to conference. Even when it was in London, when we had it in London, I was really busy during that week for the first one, and so one day I'll make it to conference, but I haven't yet made it there. But from my understanding is that with the actual ambassador program, and also obviously you've got the visionary program as well, the ability to better have that one-to-one session with other sort of users. I very much enjoyed this presentation, this opportunity to present to you guys, but the ability to have a much more face-to-face aspect with users in the conference settings is so much more something that I would certainly look forward to being able to handle at some point in the future.
Well, the pleasure was all ours, to be honest with you, with that presentation. So you needn't be thanking us, and we'd be happy to have both of you back anytime. And you know, you never know. Even maybe in the future, we might even fly you over for an experience of the Dublin face-to-face, which can be eventful. So listen, I think if nobody else has any questions or anything like that, I think we'll leave it there. Just two things. Kira Brennan has put a couple of things. Fun fact: Simon has over 100,000 points in the Tableau community forums. Is that right? And then she follows that up by saying, shameless plug now for the Tableau community forums, which is a great space, and there's a link there as well for everybody to take advantage of. And I, of course, had to put in a plug as well. Just a reminder that we're back for the face-to-face TUG on July the 30th, we think. So we'll update you on the Information Lab Ireland's LinkedIn page. So if you want to follow that, you can. There's the link to that. And there's also going to be the emails going out via Splash and that kind of thing as well. And Steve Martin, to everyone, has put up his Tableau public profile there as well.
Now, what that one is, I was just putting it in as
yeah,
speaking, so I'm sorry about that. But
no,
that
God, there's nothing to worry about. It's all part and parcel.
That one there was the second demo dashboard that actually has the things like the set changes and things like that. I've just quickly logged it online so everyone can download the workbook and get the calculations behind that.
That's brilliant. Okay, that's very generous. Okay, listen, I'm going to leave it at that, folks, and I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you very much We'll announce the next Tableau User Group Ireland, maybe in 2 or 3 months. And in the meantime, hope to see you all in Dublin on July 20th. Simon, Steve, thank you very much for your time. It was absolutely brilliant.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, guys. So thank you.
Take care, guys. I'll hang on until everybody's left and make sure I'm ushering you out the virtual door. So we'll see you later, guys. All the best. Thanks everybody who came along.
Cool.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Okay, just like
all the best. Take care.
Thanks,
See you again.
See ya.